welcome to Unicity Channel on Tuesday, 8 p.m. The dramatic rise in life expectancy that the industrial world has experienced throughout the 20th century has made aging an important topic. Complementary and alternative medicine has flourished since the beginning of time because of a human need to postpone the aging process and to reverse disease. Why is it important to study aging process? From a public health perspective, aging is also the critical risk factor for a variety of human pathologies, including auto and neurodegenerative disease such as Alzheimer, many forms of cancer, and metabolic disease, which have become much more prevalent in the elderly today. Join me and welcome Unicity scientist Dr. Erin Glynn for this important topic. Welcome, Dr. Erin Glynn.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's been a while since I've had the pleasure of speaking with this group, so I'm very happy to be back with you again this evening to talk about this really fascinating topic of aging and kind of how it's regulated on a genetic level and how we can use our lifestyle and nutrition to help slow down and even in some cases reverse this process of aging. So I know that you've already heard some great information in this series from your product trainers, Winda and Claudia. I watched their presentation last week and I thought that was great. So today we're going to review some of the important concepts that they've already shared with you about this. And then we'll also go into some new details and touch on how some of our Unicity products can interact with some of these aging pathways. Now, much of what we'll cover today is related to our genes and the DNA that encodes them. So I want to start here with our DNA and a brief review of that. DNA contains our genetic code. Our DNA is what makes each of us unique. It gives us all our unique characteristics, things like eye color, hair color, skin color, even features like the size of our nose, our height. All of these are controlled by our genes, our DNA. And the DNA holds the instructions for our bodies to make the proteins that are required for us to function, to live. These instructions are written as a code using essentially 4 smaller components called nucleotides. I'm going to see if I can get my pointer here. There we go. Okay, so these nucleotides are shown in the picture as these colored bars here. And they're often referred to by their letter abbreviations, which are A, T, G, and C. You don't have to remember their names. It's not important. I just want us to understand this basic structure of DNA as we go through the talk today. So 2 of these nucleotides combine in the center of this DNA helix. You can see the 2 colors that are combining together. This is called a base pair. And basically this A, the red, you'll always see paired with T. And the blue and the green, the G and the C will also always be paired together. And that's just important as we think about the DNA replicating itself. And we're not going into that today, but it's just an interesting fact to know that these nucleotides are what are the code of our DNA. And depending on the order of those nucleotides, so maybe you have an order that's A, T, G, C, that is going to provide a code for something versus if you had the code TACG, some other order of those letters, right? So this is the code. This is what we're talking about when we say that our DNA provides the code. Now, this DNA is in almost all of our cells. It's not in every single cell, but most of our cells. And for the most part, it's the same. We have the same exact about 2 meters, as Claudia told you last week, of DNA in all of our cells, but it's expressed differently. So the DNA that is kind of turned on and functional in a skin cell is going to be different than the DNA that's turned on in your liver cells. And we'll get to more about that in a little bit. But I just mentioned we have that 2 meters of DNA in a tiny little cell. And actually within the cell, the DNA is in the nucleus. So an even smaller part that we have to compact all of this 2 meters of DNA in for every single cell in our body. So how does our body do that? Well, the DNA is compacted through a series of steps. And basically, I want you to see here these nucleotides again, the A, T, C, and G that we just learned about. These form the strand of DNA that you can see here, goes into what's called the DNA helix. And then the DNA helix is wrapped around proteins called histones. So these histones are important. They're important for aging, as we'll find out. But what I want you to know here is just that the DNA wraps around these, and that helps compact it so it can fit into tighter spaces, and ultimately a really compacted DNA forms what we call a chromosome, which you may have heard of as, what contains our genetic code as humans, human chromosomes. Now, the packaging of the DNA, how that DNA is wound around your histones, is what keeps our cells essentially reading the right parts of the DNA for the right cells. Okay, so I mentioned, a liver cell only has certain parts of the DNA that are read, and a skin cell only has certain parts. So the wrapping around these histones is an important controller of how the cell is accessing and reading that DNA, that code. Okay, so we know our DNA is our genetic code that holds all of this information used for our body to make proteins. And genes, which you also may have heard of, genes are just small sections of that DNA, small stretches of the DNA, the code, the A, T, C, and G, that provide instructions for a particular protein. So you can think of this as if your DNA were like a recipe book, a huge book full of recipes of how to make things. A gene would be a single page or recipe within that book for a protein. Okay, so maybe it's a protein, it tells your body how to make insulin, or it tells your body which order to put amino acids in to make an enzyme or to build a muscle protein. Each of these tiny little things in our body is encoded by a gene that tells our body the recipe for making that. So whether genes are active, meaning they're able to be read and create the proteins that they have this recipe for, is called gene expression. So we say if the gene is on, if it's being expressed, that protein is being made. On the other hand, if the gene is not being expressed, or we don't have that particular protein or product of the gene being made, then gene expression is off. And there are a lot of things, a lot of complicated processes that control whether genes are turned on or off, or upregulated or suppressed at various times. But what we do know is that in healthy people, this process of gene expression, when things are turned on, how the genes are functioning, is functioning how we would expect it to, right? Insulin is being made when insulin needs to be made. The muscle proteins are being turned on and rejuvenated when they need to go through that process. On the other hand, when we're in diseased states and also with the process of aging, that the process of gene expression and how all of it is regulated can really start functioning, not stop functioning properly. So you have issues in how either the genes are read or how they're actually made into proteins. And there's, like I said, a lot of different ways that can happen. But the point is, when we're healthy, it's functioning as it should. Things are turned on or off at the appropriate times. And in other conditions, diseases and aging, this process starts to become dysregulated. So just to complicate things a tiny bit more, but I promise this relates to aging and to the regulation of aging, we also have what's called the epigenome. So we know the genome, it's your genetic information in the DNA, and epi literally means above. So epigenome is above the DNA. It kind of sits on top of your DNA. And what it is these compounds and chemicals that can modify the DNA, modify or mark it. And it does these processes and it ultimately affects what the genes are being told to do, where they're being told to go and be expressed, and when, the timing of that. So just as an example, in this picture, you can see an epigenome mark would be the addition of this methyl group here. So it's just a small molecule that can get placed on top of the DNA that can affect gene expression. Now, you can see in this insert that's off to the side of the image that the DNA, it's wrapped around those proteins we talked about called the histones, right? These help to compact the DNA like we talked about, but the histones are also involved in how the DNA is expressed. So you can see here, if the DNA is wrapped around a histone and this part of a gene is blocked from the machinery of the cell that would read the gene, then you're not going to get that gene expressed. So both this process of epigenetic modification by tagging the DNA with these different chemicals can affect gene expression, but also the histones and how they're wound and the DNA is bound around them can affect gene expression. Okay, all of this is just to give you some background on our genes, how they're regulated, and we'll talk then about how aging can affect these things. Okay, so let's look a little bit about what's involved in aging. I think when we think about aging, we tend to think about the external manifestations of aging. So things like with our skin. In this picture, you can see a younger, youthful person on the left side and an aging person on the right. And you see things like discoloration of the skin, sagging skin, graying hair, even thinning hair, things like that we all associate with aging. But all of these things are controlled by those genes, those processes. I'll give you an example. The sagging skin that you start to get as you age, that is due to a loss of a protein in your skin called elastin that helps your skin, collagen and elastin both, but it helps your skin stay firm and bounce back into place. And these proteins, the expression of them, the making of them from that recipe of the DNA is reduced as we age. So again, that has to do with your body, these processes being dysregulated as we age, which result in changes in how the proteins that are supposed to be expressed, like our collagen and elastin in the skin, are actually produced. Now, I know Claudia also covered some of these common contributors to the aging process. These are kind of the ones we know about, right? We know sun damage accelerates the aging of our skin. Pollution can cause all kinds of health problems, both externally with our skin, but also internally. And it really can drive inflammation in our body. We know that what and when we eat can either positively or negatively affect our aging processes. And we'll talk more about this in a few minutes. Whether we get adequate sleep throughout our lifetime, really, sleep is really important for long-term health. So we all need to be aiming to get, really, for adults, 7 to 8 hours a night is recommended. And then other lifestyle factors, such as whether you exercise, whether you smoke, things that you're exposed to in your daily environment, all of these are contributing to our aging processes. And again, the answer to how these things contribute to aging is at the cellular level. So it's not defined by any single event, right? It's the compilation of a lot of things that are coming together and affecting our cells and our genes. So things just stop functioning as well over time. Did you know that right now, right here, as we're sitting here listening to the talk, or I'm talking, our DNA is being mutated. We're getting tiny errors in our DNA every day because our DNA is constantly replicating itself, making copies. And normally, these mutations are fixed or repaired by our body. That's a normal process. Our body knows, okay, millions and millions of these base pairs being copied. There's going to be some errors. Your body has mechanisms to deal with that and fix that. But as we age, we start to lose those repair mechanisms as well. And mutations or changes in the DNA can cause a lot of issues in our body. They can cause our body not to be able to read that genetic code. Like if you change the letters in a word, that word might not make sense anymore, right? And that's basically what happens with a mutation. So that's happening as we age, and that can cause what's here, genetic instability. But we also have epigenetic changes, those little markers and tags that we talked about. Those change over time with aging as well. And we know that those control how a gene is expressed, where it's expressed, when it's expressed. So obviously changes in those markers will have an effect on gene expression as well. Other things that happen, so loss of protein homeostasis. Those proteins that are made by the genes, again, gets into complicated things, but our proteins are kind of folded up. They're not these straight strings of amino acids. They're made from amino acids, and then those amino acids fold up into little tight structures, which are the proteins. Well, sometimes the folding of those proteins can be disrupted, and misfolded proteins also cause a lot of issues in our bodies. So we have complications with this as we age. Dysregulation of nutrient sensing. You may have heard that as we age, our body becomes less sensitive to things like protein, to certain vitamins. They're not absorbed as well, but just also our cellular machinery doesn't sense the nutrients as well. So this happens, this is a hallmark of aging on a cellular level. Mitochondria, these powerhouses of our cell that help us generate energy, these also become more dysregulated and more dysfunctional with age. And how our cells talk to each other. There's a lot of, it's called cellular signaling that goes on within our cells. The proteins within our cells are sending signals to each other, talking to each other. this can become also disrupted as we age. We talked about inflammation. It's the result of a lot of things. It can be from our diet. It can be from what we put into our bodies, what we inhale from the air. So all of this is involved in creating inflammation. And if we're not proactively trying to reduce inflammation in our bodies, that's just accumulating over our lifetime. And then the last thing is loss of diversity in our gut, the microbes in our gut, the good bacteria in our gut. It's good for us to have a wide variety of those. And we tend to have that when we're younger. And this reduces with age. And that also causes a lot of issues with just general digestive function. So, okay, I just feel like I told you everything that can go wrong as we age. It sounds pretty bleak, but the good news is we really can take steps to slow these processes down to keep our cells healthier longer. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with how your body is designed to defend itself against aging. So to be fair, there are hundreds of what we call longevity genes that are associated with this aging process in some way. But I want to focus on two buckets today. And the first is called AMPK. And for the sake of this talk, I'm not going to define a lot of these acronyms. I don't think that the long names are really important, but it's important for us to know what they do. So AMPK is activated in our cells in response to low energy, low availability of sugar. So you can think like, obviously, if you're not putting energy in your body, you're not getting blood sugar, increases in blood sugar. And so AMPK is activated in those circumstances. I don't want to say in starvation, but it's when you haven't had food for an extended period of time, such as a fast, like we'll talk about in a moment. So fasting does activate this gene called AMPK. And AMPK does important things, like it makes your body more sensitive to the effects of insulin through that cellular signaling we talked about. So we know being more sensitive to insulin is good because that helps keep our blood sugar in a healthy level. AMPK can also boost the mitochondria, so those powerhouses of your cell that are generating energy, those processes that decline with aging. AMPK can help boost and give your mitochondria a little bit of an upper, if you will. Okay, the other class or bucket I know that Claudia and Linda covered last week are the sirtuins. And these are so cool. They really are, I would say, an emerging area of science, but there's a ton of research going on into them right now because people are so interested in aging and how we can slow it down or prevent it, right? So the sirtuins are a group of 7 genes in humans, and they're turned on in a similar fashion to AMPK when the body is kind of stressed in some way, whether this be from a lack of energy from something like fasting, can also be activated by exercise, as can AMPK, and just general things that stress the body, not the type of stress that you might think about like work stress or things that raise your cortisol levels a lot, but just general stress that our bodies would normally go through maybe 100 years ago, but that we aren't necessarily putting our bodies through these days with, our pretty wide access to food and a lack of exercise and things like that. So sirtuins are important. They actually are what we call conserved throughout a lot of different plant species, fungi, And what's interesting about things that are conserved across a wide variety of organisms and plants is that this typically means they're an important set of genes because they are in yeast, they're in flies, they're in us, they're in plants. So we know that the sirtuins are a very important class of genes, and they're central regulators of longevity or aging. So the sirtuins and AMPK, they talk to each other. So they're both acting kind of as an energy sensing mechanisms within the cell to know what's happening in the external environment. Does my body have enough food? Do we have enough nutrients? If we don't, we're going to turn on some of these pathways that are activated by a little bit of stress, but that actually are good for you, and we should be activating them. So how do they work? Again, Claudia did a great job explaining this, but we can think of the sirtuins as, I think she called them guardians of the galaxy, but guardians of our DNA or protectors. So they help fix DNA damage that occurs naturally. They make enzymes that control that epigenome. So the thing we talked about that can tag or make chemical modifications to our DNA, these sirtuin enzymes can control the epigenome. And what scientists are thinking is that it's this control, keeping the epigenome in check and keeping it in that younger state is what helps keep our cells younger longer. So that's how the sirtuins are working. And another really important aspect of both AMPK and the sirtuins is this process of autophagy. So autophagy is your cell's natural process of basically taking out its garbage, right? Your cells, the proteins that they make, they don't stay good forever. Over time, we heard that they can get misfolded, other things can go wrong. And even if they're still doing great, sometimes you want to break something down and rebuild it, just make sure that it's still structurally sound, right? So autophagy is this process that's activated to help clean out waste from your cells, break it down into its building blocks again, usually those amino acids, or it could be nucleic acids, and then recycle them so they get reused again in the body. So this is a really important process, and it pretty much only occurs when we're in a low energy state. So for example, in a fasted state. And so the sirtuins and AMPK are both involved in activating autophagy, which is a really critical process that our cells need to undergo to stay healthy. So going back to this, we have these two sets of genes and the cellular pathways that they're involved with that are important regulators of aging. They're energy stressors. They're activated when the body is a little bit stressed. And I think I was going to talk about the recycling, the autophagy on this slide, and I got a little ahead of myself. But basically, these are some key regulators of that autophagy recycling process, and really important for helping keep our cells healthy as we age. So fasting, we've mentioned a few times that both of those sensors, AMPK and the sirtuins, are activated by fasting. Now, Unicity has promoted essentially a form of what we call intermittent fasting for quite a few years now. It's called 4-4-12. And the concept of 4-4-12 was really just to help people understand that you're not supposed to be eating all the time. We're supposed to give our bodies times of rest to digest, to process the food that it was given, to allow insulin levels that rise as you eat a meal to come back down to baseline and kind of reset. And all of that is important for proper functioning. So 4-4-12, the concept was that you wait at least 4 hours after, let's say this line is your breakfast. You wait at least 4 hours after breakfast before you have lunch. You wait at least 4 hours after that before you eat dinner. So you're not snacking in between, that defeats the purpose. And then you wait at least 12, that's where the 12 hours comes from, at least 12 hours after your dinner before you eat food again the next day. And 12 is kind of the minimum. You can see that 4, 4, and 12 don't add up to 24. It adds up to 20, right? So there's some extra hours in there for you to work with. But the point is at least 12 hours that you're not consuming food, right? So this is a great place to start for people to start understanding that concept. I shouldn't be snacking all the time. I shouldn't be eating from the time I wake up in the morning until the time I go to bed every day. But Feel Great, the Feel Great system that I'm sure you've been hearing some about, we launched it in the US, I think about a year ago, and now it's expanding all around the world to our markets. So Feel Great is this form of intermittent fasting called 16-8, which just means you're fasting instead of that 12 hours, you're extending that a little bit longer and aiming for 16 hours from the time you eat dinner, finish dinner the night before, until you consume food the next day. And this 16 hours has been shown to have some great benefits for activating those anti-aging genes, the AMPK, the sirtuins, and the process of autophagy. So within this 8-hour window, it's a little less strict about when you can eat. Like you could eat kind of every hour if you wanted to, but it's still not ideal. You still want to have some food, give your body the chance to process that and rest, and then have more. But you're eating all of your food for your day within that 8-hour window. Okay, so we know fasting is a great way to activate these pathways, but what else can we do? Well, in addition to fasting, moderate exercise, which stresses our body a little bit, is great to add to your daily routine. So if you're not doing that, trying to get some moderate exercise most days of the week is really important. And the last thing we can do involves the nutrition that we put into our bodies. And this includes supplements. So sometimes we don't get everything that we need just from our nutrition, right? So let's look at how we can use supplements and other foods to also influence these pathways. Okay, we know AMPK is responsive to low blood sugar levels. It can't be active with high blood sugar levels. AMPK will be turned off if you have elevated blood sugar. So we know that when we eat a meal, particularly with carbohydrates in it, that we get a glucose or blood sugar spike. And in response, our insulin rises. And basically, this causes, as our insulin rises, it helps that sugar from our blood get into our cells. Okay. So, yes, insulin, you see from this graph here, there we go. Insulin does make your blood sugar go down out of your blood, but it's making the sugar in your cells go up, because that's what's happening. Your sugar is moving from your blood into your cells. So even though this looks like a decrease in blood sugar, that is true, but really you're getting energy into your cells. So AMPK is going to be turned off when you eat a meal, particularly a high carbohydrate meal. But we know that by using Unicity BioSlife fibers, so BioSlife S, BioSlife C+, taking these before a meal that contains carbohydrates will slow that rise in glucose and slow the rise in insulin. And this will help us get back to that fasted state more quickly, more easily. Your body doesn't have as long to come down from processing that meal. So this is a really good way to help get our body back to that fasting, that fat burning state that we like to be in, that we talked a lot about with 4412, and really good products to help that. And as well, they help with things like cholesterol and all of those other benefits, satiety that we know about. But in terms of affecting the anti-aging genes we're talking about, this is how it does that. Another product that I know Claudia touched on last week is Unimate. Unimate is amazing. It's my favorite. I'm drinking it right now because it's 6:30 in the morning here. So I need my caffeine, which are one of the main active compounds that we have in Unimate, but it's really so much more than that. It's an extract from this plant, the yerba mate plant, and it contains important compounds like chlorogenic acids, theobromine, and saponins that also have genetic effects. They affect our genome. So what's interesting about the chlorogenic acids is these are polyphenols. And we know that polyphenols can activate the sirtuins and AMPK. Now, I didn't see anything that chlorogenic acids have been confirmed to activate the sirtuins yet. But I think it's very plausible that based on the physiology of how our body uses these, that we'll see that in the future. But we do know that chlorogenic acids can activate AMPK, so the other bucket of those anti-aging genes, which I think, yeah, their sirtuins are cool and important, but AMPK is also really important. So chlorogenic acids that we find in Unimate can activate AMPK signaling. So this can really also help you extend your fast. You can drink it and you're still fasting. It provides that caffeine, it provides the chlorogenic acids, which can support mood and focus as well. The theobromine is kind of the happy compound that we find in chocolate. So that also helps with mood. So as you're pushing yourself to extend for that 16-hour fast, the compounds in Unimate can really help with that. Okay, so I've talked a lot and I'm sorry, I think I'm going over time. I hope you guys can stay a few more minutes because what I really wanted to talk about today is our product called Injuvenate. Injuvenate is kind of our primary anti-aging, age supporting supplement that we have at Unicity. And it's really an amazing product. I know a lot of people are big fans and take it religiously, but it is scientifically designed. It really is. It has the right amounts of a lot of different ingredients that support this anti-aging concept. So it's hitting aging from different angles, different aspects of aging, things like energy that can decrease as we age, healthy blood circulation. So we know blood flow tends to decrease as we age. And so this product can help boost that again. Maintenance of lean muscle mass, another aspect of aging. We get decreases in our lean muscle mass with aging. That's called sarcopenia. So this product is designed to address that. So both supporting lean muscle mass, but also activating fat metabolism. So we also tend to add on more body fat as we age. And then it also addresses mood and cognitive support. So all of these things combine to form a really amazing product that does leave people feeling rejuvenated. So let's take a closer look at what's in this product. You can see listed here, the first ingredient is GABA aminobutyric acid. I did say that one all the way out, but I kind of regret it. So GABA is what's called an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it naturally is occurring in our brain, and taking it by supplement doesn't necessarily have the same effects as that naturally occurring molecule. But what we have seen from studies with taking GABA as a supplement is that it can have effects on relaxation, on helping to improve your sleep. So we know, obviously, if you're kind of relaxed as you go to bed, you're going to have better sleep. We've seen that sleep is really important for aging, right? And making sure that we get our good 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night is critical to helping our bodies rejuvenate, go through that process of autophagy at night. So GABA is helping us chill out, relax a little bit, and promote more restful sleep. So another ingredient that we have is called maca. Maca root is traditionally used, is from Peru, and it has really interesting research and traditional use in the areas of libido and energy and sexual health. So this ingredient, as well as the one that's listed right below it, tribulus, has some of those similar effects on libido and just overall vitality and energy. Sometimes there's not as much scientific support, I would say, for these more traditionally used botanicals and herbs, but I do think that these two have some pretty strong scientific support for these functions. And so they're really cool ingredients, and they will contribute to some of those maybe libido or drive effects that people feel, increased blood flow from taking Injuvenate. All right, oh, that's just a little picture of the maca root there. So we talked about those three ingredients, GABA, maca, and tribulus, with these benefits around libido, energy, mood, and GABA can also support that stress, relaxation, and sleep, right? All of this is important for recovery and rejuvenation at night. But we have other ingredients that can support this. So actually, one thing I forgot to mention about the GABA is there's some evidence to suggest that you get a transient increase in growth hormone with GABA when you take GABA. So growth hormone controls a lot of processes in our bodies, but basically it's just there for restoration, for rejuvenating, for rebuilding. So GABA, you can get this increase in growth hormone that's happening right as you go to bed, which is good because that's when our body rejuvenates and remodels itself. So another key ingredient that can support this concept of boosting growth hormone is ornithine. So this is one of the amino acids that's found in Injuvenate. Now, ornithine it's not an amino acid that our body uses to rebuild protein. So instead, it's used for other processes and cycles in our cells. But like I said, this can also cause that transient increase in growth hormone, which as you go to sleep at night after taking this product will help your body rejuvenate and rebuild. We also have other amino acids like L-glutamate that have been shown also to help the body just restore itself. Glutamate has been shown to be a fuel source for our intestinal cells and our immune cells. So taking glutamate can help rebuild the cellular lining of our gut. If you happen to have micro tears in the gut or some issues with your gut, glutamate can be great to take for that. So this is also included in Injuvenate. All of these may seem like kind of random ingredients, but really they're all focused at addressing different angles of aging. And the combination of them are why people feel amazing when they take Injuvenate. So we talked about glutamate, those amino acids. We talked about GABA and how that promotes sleep and relaxation. And the last piece that Injuvenate has that really can support the anti-aging aspect are antioxidants. So we didn't add just a vitamin antioxidant like vitamin A, C, or E here. The antioxidants in Injuvenate are naturally occurring in the maca and the tribulus. And naturally occurring antioxidants function very similarly to vitamin A, C, and E. They help our body fight free radical damage. Now, again, just sitting here, all of us are creating these free radicals from normal metabolism. We all have them, but our body has these antioxidant defense systems that help balance those out so that they don't cause damage to our cells. Injuvenate provides those antioxidants from the natural maca, the tribulus, which also are helping restore and protect our body from those reactive oxygen species at night as our body is restoring itself. So just to touch on how we recommend taking Injuvenate if you've never taken it before, we do recommend it every other day, or a lot of people take it like 2 to 3 times a week at night. So you're taking it maybe about an hour before you go to bed, and then letting it work its magic overnight. So that's the best way to take Injuvenate. Oops, sorry, left that extra slide in there. So this is just a model of a DNA structure, just to kind of circle back to that and recap what we've said today. But basically, I hope you've learned kind of all of the processes that are involved at the cellular level in aging our cells, and then the defense mechanisms that we have with AMPK, with the sirtuins that help suppress some of those processes, that help repair DNA damage, and that help activate autophagy to clean up our cells and restore and rejuvenate us. And how some of those unicity products we talked about, the fibers, the Unimate, and Injuvenate, can all help support our bodies be better at those processes and activate those important genes and cellular pathways within our bodies. So thanks for hanging with me a little bit over time, and I think I will stop here and be open to any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Erin. I think that was wonderful, and you really brought the topic of genetic to its justice. Okay, and the way you explain it, and I wouldn't be able to capture all these details. So I think it's wonderful to have you to re-educate us on this. All right, and she also mentioned about Injuvenate, as we know that it's one of our, top-selling anti-aging products here. All right, so since we have this rare opportunity to have Dr. Erin, okay, all the way from the US to do this with us, I think I would love to have some questions, all right? Any, dying questions that you have, we have 15 minutes for that. So, okay, anyone who would like
I see one question here. Can Unimate eaten with food still activate AMPK? So I would say probably not. I mean, I haven't looked at this in the cell, but we know AMPK will not be activated when the cell has a lot of energy, right? Or from food. So if your body is maybe there's still some chlorogenic acid hanging around from your Unimate after your food has been digested, then yes, maybe that could help activate AMPK. But really, it would be best taken in the fasted state, where those chlorogenic acids we know will further activate AMPK in the fasted state. And AMPK stands for AMP activated protein kinase. I don't know if you want me to go into more detail, but AMP is an energy source in our cell, and so AMPK is activated by that. Let's see, I saw another question. AMPK is activated at low energy state. Exercise is high. So actually, but exercise is using energy and it's stressing. And so these two sets of genes, the AMPK and the sirtuins, are activated by stress. And so you need energy to exercise, but exercise is not generating energy, it's using energy, right? So it does activate AMPK that way. In short, Unimate in the morning and Injuvenate at night. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, you can mix Unimate with hot water. It's actually pretty great with hot water, depending, I don't know what flavors. You guys have lemon, right? Do you have lemon ginger also?
Yeah, Singapore.
Okay. Yeah, I think all of the flavors are good, hot or cold. When is the best to use Unimate fuel with 16A? Okay, Unimate fuel gets a little bit complicated because it does contain energy, right? It does contain calories because it has the fat. It has the MCTs from the coconut oil in it. So there's kind of two schools of thinking about what breaks a fast. You can think of breaking a fast as anything that causes your digestive system to kind of kick in and start processing the food. So fuel would cause that, but fuel will not increase your glucose and insulin. So if we're thinking about fasting in terms of trying to keep our insulin low, trying to keep in that fat burning state, then fuel could be used in the morning in that way. So it's kind of up to you. Personally, I would aim to still try to push for that 16 hours without the calories. But if your focus is more on the benefits that you get from fasting by keeping glucose and insulin low, then fuel could be taken really anytime. Okay, let's see. Can we consume an Injuvenate continuously, or how many months per year? Yeah, I would say it's fine to consume over several months throughout the year. You don't need to cycle it, but it is only recommended to take at most every other day. But I think the most common practice is 2 to 3 times per week. So again, fine to keep taking throughout the course of the year, but not daily. How many minimum hours of fasting activates AMPK and sirtuin? So I think about 12 hours. So at 12 hours, you will start to see some of these processes kick in. And it just continues to build and get stronger and more activation as you go on with time. So 16 hours is great. Starting with 12 is also, you will start to see some of those benefits. Autophagy is thought to be activated around 12 hours as well. So yeah, you'll see benefits as little as 12 hours, but they just get better with time. For those who had gastric problem, how can they follow Feel Great? Okay, well, I'm not exactly sure what gastric problem, and I don't want to give medical advice here, but fasting is something that I feel like most people should talk to their doctor. There are certain conditions or times you would not want to fast. If you already have type 2 diabetes and you're on blood sugar medications, obviously you want to talk to your doctor, because fasting, while over time it will improve your blood sugar, you will be going for an extended period of time without food, and that obviously affects your blood sugar. So other gastric problems, I think hopefully the fiber would help people who have digestive issues, because most of us are not getting enough fiber. But again, just that system of combining the Unimate, the fiber, and fasting, it should be safe for most people to follow. Pregnant women, it's not advised to fast for long periods of time. And I will say that's not necessarily out of a safety concern, it's out of lack of studies. So really just lack of a lot of studies that have been done in pregnant women and fasting, because of, you know, putting a potential risk to a woman and baby. So anyway, I feel like I rambled on that question. Will it be too much to mix Unimate and Bios Life E too much caffeine? Okay, that depends on how much caffeine you're used to and can handle. Unimate has about as much as a high quality cup of coffee. It's naturally occurring caffeine, so it varies a little bit. You know, in one in one lot, we might be getting 75 milligrams of caffeine, and one it might be 82. So you're going to get some variations in that. And the same with BioSlife E. So I used to mix citrus mint and BioSlife E together as my morning drink, and I loved it. But I would sip it in this really big 800 ml container over, maybe 2 hours. So it really just depends on how sensitive you are to caffeine. It's not too much if you are tolerant of, higher doses of caffeine. Can Injuvenate delay menopause if taken early? Delay, I'm not sure. So menopause, it's really related to hormones and how many eggs you've released over your lifetime and a lot of different factors. I don't know that I can answer that question here. I'm happy to look into that a little bit more, but I don't know why in particular it would delay it. It can certainly help with some of the negative effects that people experience with menopause. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. Injuvenate alternate days. Yes. At minimum every other day. But it's also fine to stick more to like a 2 to 3 times per week. And then Clear Start 30 followed by Injuvenate. So I guess, are you asking, would you do the 30-day cleanse first and then after 30 days start taking Injuvenate? I think that is a good plan. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. Sometimes I just advise people not to start a ton of supplements at one time, right? If you start 10 different things that your body is not used to, that you haven't taken before, it can kind of be a shock to your system. And then it's also hard to know if you're getting some kind of potential side effect, like maybe something's giving you a headache. It's hard to know what that's from if you start a bunch of things at one time. So I do think going through a cleanse first would be a good idea, and then starting Injuvenate after. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, that's a good amount of questions. All right, thank you so much. So if anyone, you have any more questions about Injuvenate or the products that's mentioned, please feel free to give me an email and I will forward it to Dr. Erin and see how we can help you out. All right, so thank you so much everybody for your time here today. We're very fortunate and we're blessed to have you, and can't wait to see you in GIC. All right, so
Yes.
yeah, for the rest of you, I hope you all have your tickets ready, and we will see you in Bangkok very soon. All right, thank you everyone for your time here today. We appreciate it. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.